Well, hey, you, and welcome back to another episode of the Miss Michaela Mae Show. I'm your host, Miss Michaela Mae, here with my corgis, Tank and Willie. So if you hear any pause in the background, PAWS, it's a couple of corgis. Uh, it feels like it's been a minute, and because I pre-recorded last week's episode, and what's interesting is I didn't like it. I do like sitting down and recording every week. So I technically had last week off because I pre-recorded and I knew I was going to be on the road and traveling. So I did that very intentionally, but yeah, I didn't like it. And it was a really good reminder. This is something that I've been experiencing and going through and learning in real time is we really can't mess it up, as in we always learn. And I think how we perceive it often is when we succeed, we go a step forward, and when we fail, we go a step backwards. But in reality, when we succeed, we go a step forward, and when we fail, we go a step forward, because every failure and every success is getting us closer to our goal. Because when we succeed, we know what to do. But when we don't succeed, when we quote unquote fail, we know what not to do. And both things actually get us closer to our goal or to our desired outcome. And that's been, again, a lesson I have been learning in real time of, oh, I could perceive that as a failure, but it actually is a success, because I just learned, oh, I really do like sitting down and talking to you every week. Like, that's what it feels like when I don't sit down and record. I feel like I haven't talked to you in a week and I don't like it. So thank you for being here. Thank you for being here last week. I was technically there last week, but it didn't feel like I was, because I wasn't sitting down and recording this the week that it came out, which was just odd for me. So that was a good little lesson for me. So thank you for being here. And let's get into today's topic of, you don't have a problem, you have a pattern. And I have a friend that I meet with twice a month, and she had told me, I believe she was listening to a podcast, and she said that the guest on the show said, the only problem is you think you have a problem. And that has just since she told me that probably about 2 weeks ago, maybe it was a month ago now. And since then, I've really been thinking about that, like, oh, again, similar to the, we think failure is a step backwards and success is a step forward, but in reality, they're both a step forward. This is like the same thing. We think we have a problem, but it's only a problem because we perceive it as a problem, right? Some other people would see it as a challenge. Some other people would perceive it as a growth or a hurdle that they have to learn how to jump over, or, people would describe the same thing differently. And so I was thinking about this with, personal development and healing, and us perceiving ourselves in very specific ways. Of, we are perceiving ourselves as problems, or we're perceiving the things that we don't like about ourselves as problems. But something that we don't like about ourselves, somebody else can love about ourselves. Again, it comes down to a perception. So I'd really been playing with this concept because I have some habits in my life that I'm working on shifting, because I'm not fond of them. And so one of the problems, quote unquote, is my phone. I've been on my phone way more than I want to be. One of my intentions and one of my goals is to spend more time creating than I do consuming. And as of right now, my consumption is higher than my creation. And I've really been working on flipping that script. And so, but I was beating myself up about it. And it took me, I thought about my friend saying, the only problem is you think you have a problem. And it took me back to my personal development era, is what I call it, in the Tony Robbins days. Of one of the things that Tony Robbins he talked about this at UPW and at Date with Destiny when I went, because I went to both in the same year. And he talked about that the most successful people in the world have one thing in common, and it's that they can see patterns. And there was 3 steps that Tony talked about. He talked about being able to see a pattern, being able to replicate a pattern, and then being able to create patterns. And all the most successful people in the world have those 3 things in common. They can spot patterns, they can follow patterns, they can copy trends, and then they can create their own patterns. And one of the other things that we learned at these personal development seminars is that everything in life is a pattern. Seasons are patterns. Our behaviors are patterns. And so, hence the title of this episode, we don't have problems, we have patterns. So I have a pattern of picking up my phone. So last night, I wasn't planning on talking about what happened last night, but I'm going to talk about what happened last night. So if you're uncomfortable with TMI, this is turn this episode off now. If you're like me, where you're like, I don't just want half a cup of tea, I want the full tea. Give me all the TMI because I need the TMI to have my full cup of tea. If you're with me on that level, then this episode is for you. And so anyway, I was thinking about this pattern that I've had with my phone, and I'm trying not to call it a problem. I'm trying not to call it a habit. I'm trying not to call it an addiction, because in our subconscious mind, which we've talked about quite a bit on this show, when we identify with something, or when we identify something as a possession, we're not going to let it go. Like, think about, you say you have a car. If I go to take your car away from you, you're not going to be thrilled about it. You're going to come after me. You're going to do everything you can to get your car back because it's your car. Where if I'm at your house and I get in my car and I drive away, you're not going to freak out about it because it's not your car. And the same thing with identity. If we say, like, I am an addict, or I am an addictive, like, what's that saying? Addictive personality. Like, you're not going to let it go because, again, similar to the car, you're identifying it as a piece of you. Where when we start to say these things like, oh, I have a pattern, we don't get attached to patterns subconsciously, right? It's like, I have a like a pattern on a sheet, on a like piece of drapery. Like, okay, not a big deal. And so again, even just the last like week or so, as I'm trying to rewire this pattern, the first thing I'm doing is switching my language around it. Like, okay, I have this pattern of, because I was really like calling it an addiction. And I think sometimes, because it does feel like that, like the phone is like so interesting because it just like consumes. Like, for me, I have a very busy mind. It quiets my thoughts. It gives me something to focus on. It's entertaining. Like, it hits all of these needs. And so the first thing I'm doing is I'm just shifting my language around it. Like, okay, this is a pattern. I have a pattern of going to pick up my phone. Now, the second thing is like, okay, we have to start to see, when does this pattern start? When does this pattern end? Like, what is that loop? I'm like, oh, so last night I identified like, oh, I'm going to my phone when I'm having uncomfortable emotions come up. Like, when I'm feeling uncomfortable, I'm having these emotions come up. So what I wanted to do was identify, what emotion am I feeling very uncomfortable with? Like, what is the emotion that I'm holding on to, but I'm also resisting feeling. And so I have an emotional protocol that I take my clients through, that I take myself through, to find the trapped emotion and what's creating this. And so I ran myself through the protocol. And what was really interesting is what came up was rejection. And what was really interesting as I kept going through the protocol is, a part of me, and this makes sense why it has been like, this experience with my phone has been so pervasive, is because the phone was literally a mirror to this emotion. So everything that I'm feeling with the phone is the exact feelings that I was actually avoiding, which it's all of our emotions work like that. But it's really interesting. Like, I've been doing this work for 3.5 years now, and I'm still like, last night as I was describing this emotion, it dawned on me that it was reflecting to everything that I was feeling with the phone, of like, I want to let go of it, but I won't let go of it. I was like, holy crap, it's like, it's so crazy, but it feels like Disneyland to me. Like, I've done this hundreds of times, if not thousands of times at this point, and I still get so excited when I get on the ride. Like, because that's what these emotion stuff feels like. So anyway, I've just revealed my Disneyland addiction, but we love it. We love a good Disneyland pattern. I've revealed my Disneyland pattern, and I love it. So anyway, so it was just so, even again, it was just so cool realizing like how they were exactly the same thing. So I'm looking at it, and a part of me, so when we have a part, it's like, okay, I feel this rejection, but it's very clear that there's a part of me that doesn't want to let this go. Very similar to the phone. Like, I'm doing this, and there's a part of me that wants to let this go, and there's a part of me that's like clinging on for dear life, that's like terrified to let this phone go, terrified to let this emotion go. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. So whenever something like that comes up, we want to stop talking to the part of our body that's holding on to the emotion, and we want to start talking to the part of our body that is the block. And so I start talking to this part of my body that is the block. And essentially it came down to, the rejection was protecting me from abandonment, and abandonment was protecting me from, or feeling abandoned. But what was interesting is how it was playing out for me is like I was abandoning things first. So then I couldn't get abandoned again. And so I get down to this abandonment, and then it came down to a very primitive fear, which is really interesting because the trapped emotion was actually stored in my kidneys, which is a very primitive part of the body. And so came down to a survival. Like if I get rejected, then I'm going to get abandoned. If I get abandoned, I'm going to get kicked out of the tribe. And if I get kicked out of the tribe, I will die. And that's what it came down to. So the TMI part of the story is I ended up releasing this emotion. I'm going to give you the rest of the story, but I'm like, I told them TMI a while ago. So I feel like I need to tell them what the TMI is. And so I release the emotion, I fall asleep, and sometimes I have an instantaneous release. Sometimes I don't. But what was really cool is a couple hours I woke up and I had to go to the bathroom now. Like, when it just hits you like a freight train, it's like, I might not get to the bathroom quick enough. And I've had stomach pains like on and off my entire life. And usually when I get these stomach pains, like it's a very specific feeling. I am in the bathroom / on the floor of the bathroom on and off for an hour because my stomach will like get really, really hot. And the only thing that makes it feel better is like if I lay my stomach on the cold tile floor. So usually it is an hour process of like on the tile floor, back on the toilet, on the tile floor, back to the toilet. And one of the things that I was working on is I'm going to my phone when I'm rejecting feelings, when I'm avoiding feelings. And so as my stomach pains were coming through, I was telling myself I'm the type of person, and this comes back to identity because we want to identify with something. Identity itself is neutral. Again, it can be productive or it can be counterproductive. So using identity to latch on to, again, I'm a phone addict, I'm addicted to my phone, that's going to be counterproductive towards my goal. But then using identity to be productive towards my goal is saying something like, I'm the kind of person who allows myself to feel through this. I'm the kind of person who allows this sensation to move through me, because essentially that's how emotion gets trapped. Emotions, we can translate that to energy in motion. And so it's when we stop the energy, we don't allow that emotion to fully flow through, that's when it gets trapped. So as this was feeling through, I'm like, I'm the type of person who allows this to flow through me, who allows myself to feel these things. I'm just kind of repeating it to myself. Stomach pains were completely gone in 5 minutes. When I was done, I was sweating like I was having a hot flash. Again, was like, I definitely got something moving out of my body. My body released something. And like, when you just have that feeling of bloat, was completely gone. I didn't have a single feeling of bloat. It was like, that's cool. Anyway, go to bed, wake up today, which would be the next morning, which would be, you'll hear this on Monday. I'm recording this on Sunday. So Sunday morning, whatever day you're listening to it. And if you're listening to this way in the future, it's probably irrelevant for you, but it's important to me that you know what day I was on. So there we go. And so I take the dogs out on a walk, and I have an episode, I'll actually link the episode below on my holistic dog and horse healing podcast about our dogs being our mirror, and horses are too. I just haven't recorded an episode about it, but our dogs will reflect back our trapped emotions to us. And so if your dog is experiencing something on some level, like if your dog has it, the dogs come first. So if your dog is experiencing something at a level 5, you may only have it at a level 1 or a level 2, meaning it's in your field, it's in your energy field, but you may not even be having symptoms of it yet. And so my dog reflects me all the time. And so I didn't really think about, like, he doesn't really have any kidney issues that I notice, right? It doesn't mean they're not there. It's that I'm not noticing it, which is good because it's not a severe thing, right? And so I'm taking him out on a walk, and he has way more energy than I have seen him have in 2 weeks. And I kind of noticed, like, I have way more energy. And it was just a really cool thing. And all of this, like, was revealed to me. And it came back to, I had a pattern of not feeling this emotion. I had a pattern of not allowing myself to feel these things. I had a pattern that needed to be released, right? And the way I see like a trapped emotion pattern, it's like it can only go, like, it doesn't actually go all the way around. It gets like, it's like a half move. If you're if you're on the video, you're watching my hand. If you're not on the video, you can't see my hand, but almost like a half circle, and it just gets stuck and it gets stuck and it gets stuck. And it's just in this loop where when we want to break actually, now that I'm talking about it, I'm changing my mind. It's like just going around in circle, and breaking the pattern is opening it and letting that emotion to fully go in and go out. And so again, it all came down to a pattern, and it wasn't a problem. It was a pattern. And the cool thing is, there's a Mr. Rogers quote that I absolutely love of, there isn't a person you couldn't learn to love once you heard their story. And in doing emotional work like this and understanding how the subconscious works, we can really start to have more compassion for ourselves, because it's really easy to say, like, I don't want to be on my phone, and I just am like beating myself up for not being on my phone. But when we go and see, like, what is the root of this? Why are we doing this in the first place? We start to see, like, oh my gosh, I experienced rejection from a very early age, and I felt abandoned. And part of the other puzzle piece in this was, when we're kids, we don't have self-regulation tools. We have to co-regulate with other people. And so if we have parents, and it was a huge thing, like, I feel like all millennial kids, their parents were being taught the cry it out method. By the way, worst thing you can do for a child that cannot co-regulate. And so it puts their nervous system into fight or flight. That creates this feeling of abandonment, because now we have no one to co-regulate with. And the studies, I'm not going to talk about it here, but I'll link a couple of studies below if you would like to read them. But when a baby cries it out, quote unquote, we're not teaching them anything except for sheer exhaustion. They've only, quote unquote, cried it out because they're so exhausted. They just went to sleep. They didn't actually, quote unquote, learn anything. And so as a child, knowing all of this, realizing, like, oh my gosh, I would just get exhausted and then just go to sleep. But I actually didn't have a tool. My tool was exhaustion. My tool was numbness. And again, that is a pattern that gets put in our nervous system. That is a pattern that gets put into our subconscious mind. And so that becomes the coping pattern. And unless we go back and undo that pattern, that is the pattern we are going to use. So now I do have something like to co-regulate with. I have a phone. And so now that I'm an adult, it's like, but you can co-regulate. You're not a baby anymore. You don't have to co-regulate anymore. You're not a baby anymore. But that pattern was installed at a very young age. So now, again, the emotional clearing, first we recognize the pattern. That's knowing how to get to the root. And then instead of recreating the pattern, we can actually uncreate the pattern. And then we can start to put tools in. Okay, what kind of pattern do I want to do instead? And one of the things that's really helpful is, for me, the saying of, I want this and I can still choose me, because it very much feels like I'm choosing my phone over doing what I want to do, again, because that's been my co-regulation tool. So that's been really helpful when I go to reach for my phone. And this has just been the last 48 hours, but it's been the best I have felt about this in months. And I've been working on my phone co-regulation pattern for months now. And so I'd go to pick it up and I would say, I can want this and still choose me. I can want this and still choose what I want to go do instead. And I can even be on this for a minute. And as I'm on my phone for a minute, ask myself, like, what am I feeling? What am I avoiding? And then on top of that, adding tools, like a couple breath work tools of, like, how do I stop the overwhelm? How do I get calm back in my body? But it all started from, because for me, I don't know about for you, but for me, when I look at it, and this is, again, the lesson I've been learning, when I look at it is, I have a problem, it starts translating in my mind to, I am the problem. I am a problem. And again, when that identity piece is there, we're not going to let it go. You're not going to let that car go if I try to take it, or if somebody else tries to take it. You're not going to let this go. And you're definitely not going to willingly give it away, right? Because I've latched onto it. I've decided this is mine and nobody or nothing else can have it. And so when I talk about the problem language, that is very much what's coming through. So even just saying, like, oh, I don't have a problem, I have a pattern, and I don't want to have this pattern anymore. It just, like, takes the charge out and, like, opens up the space of, like, okay, what patterns do you want to create instead? And that also, again, like, we're just using language that is productive towards our goals. I'm a word nerd. I love words. And the thing is, our subconscious mind is very literal. And so just like I've had to do, if you have to continue to play with words to find something that speaks to you, keep playing with them, because it's a one size fits none. What speaks to me is not necessarily going to speak to you. Sometimes it will, but sometimes it won't. So if you need to say like, oh, I get the concept, but maybe instead of a pattern, a coloring pencil circle. I don't know. I don't know what speaks to you, but like it could be anything or whatever. And so I have this pattern. And the other thing for me is like the pattern, when I say the word pattern and saying I have this pattern, it feels easy to change. And I love patterns. I've been good at patterns my whole life. Like when we did IQ testing, even in elementary school, like I always succeeded in the pattern recognition. And so that's something that I'm like, oh, this feels easy to me. This feels fun to me. This feels expansive to me of how do I change this pattern? How do I shift this pattern? How do I recognize this pattern? How do I uncreate this pattern and put a new pattern in? That's fun to me. Where when I say the word problem, I'm like, I don't feel very good. And so a lot of like, I've been in self-help, like consciously since 2017, unconsciously like dabbling in it since 2014. I think was when I bought the first. I didn't realize it was a personal development book, but it was very much a personal development. It's interesting. It was one of Dave Asprey's book, but the one thing that I love about, and he's a biohacking guy, but the one thing that I love about Dave is he's always talking about the mental piece of it. So it was technically a biohacking book sprinkled in with personal development. And so I bought that and read that in 2014. And then I read Alison Armstrong's books, which is also personal development in relationship development, I would say. In 2015, 2016, I read her books. And I wasn't really knowingly, I didn't know what personal development was. I didn't know what self-help was. I was just reading these books because my acupuncturist had recommended it to me. And then because of listening or reading her books and then reading Dave's books, I start listening to podcasts. And so I guess I've probably been in it a little more than I want to give myself credit for. But when I was like, this is self-help and I'm going to read self-help was 2017 after reading Mark Manson's The Subtle Art of Not Giving a, love that book. And so anyway, since I've been in this like self-help era, I've just really learned like it is about phrasing it in a way that works best for you. And there's really only one thing that matters. Is it productive towards your goal or is it counterproductive towards your goal? And if calling something a problem is productive towards your goal, keep calling it a problem. But if calling it a pattern helps you see the pattern, uncreate, clear, and create a new pattern easier, by all means, do what I'm doing and start switching the language around it and just see like what new patterns can you create? Because like me, you may find, and especially like that's the other thing is like we want to see what language invokes a certain emotional state within us. And for me, when I say problem, it's guilt and shame. So that's why using the language around problem is a problem for me, because it evokes feelings of guilt and shame. Like, and if we think about it, it's like, what do we associate problem with? Like being in trouble. For my family, being in a young age, it was like chaos, and just a problem meant chaos, and chaos is a good way to put it. Where pattern, it's curiosity. And so that's another reason that I like the language of pattern. It's like, ooh, this is this pattern. I can get curious about it. What was causing this or creating this pattern? And in that curiosity, again, it opens and helps me see the situation from a more objective lens, because that's why we can solve other people's problems easier than we can solve our own, is because we're objective about their problems, but we're not very objective about our own problems. But we can use certain language. We can learn to control our emotions and, for lack of a better term, manipulate, or instead of manipulate, like learn to create emotions that allow us to be more objective, or learn to get neutral so we can be completely objective to the situation. And in that's when we can actually get somewhere. And so like me, if you start to get curious and you start to switch your language, you may find you're actually way more innocent. And this pattern that you have started with a way more beautiful intent than you could have even imagined. And so the question that I'm going to leave you with today to finish out this episode is, where do you have a problem? You believe you have a problem. Is it actually a problem, or are you just perceiving it as a problem? And if it is something you want to shift, there's nothing wrong with wanting to change things in our lives. How can you see it as a pattern? How can you get more curious about it? And instead of judging yourself for it, asking like, what intention did this start with? Was it similar to myself, where it started with a very innocent survival protective mechanism? That pattern was just put into your subconscious software code, and that software code just needs changed and updated, aka the pattern needs uncreated and recreated. And yeah, I think I'm going to leave you with that today. I'm so glad we got to chat, because again, it just feels like it's been a minute, and I'm just so thankful to chat with you today. That is a wrap on this episode of the Miss Michaela Mae Show. Again, I'm so thankful you're words, Michaela, words. I'm so thankful that you are here. If you found value in today's episode, I would be so honored if you could rate and leave a review. If you are on YouTube, please subscribe to the show. But if you are on Spotify, Apple, or any of the podcast apps, I would be so honored if you could leave a review. It just helps me know what you are enjoying about the show. And it also is a way to let Apple and Spotify know, like, hey, people are listening to this show. Please push it out to more people. And it just helps me grow the show and impact more lives. So if you have a moment, I would be so thankful if you could do that for me. And until next time, I'm your host, Miss Michaela Mae, here with my corgis, Tank and Willie, and we will catch you next week, because I'm not going another week without talking to you. So anyway, as Tigger would say, TTFN, ta-ta for now.